I'll wait till they close the doors and get it going. A few more people coming. Thank you, Elaine. Hello, everyone. Thanks for attending this presentation. My name is Michael Bierman. I'm an EIT here at Transoff Solutions, soon to be PEng. And today I'm going to be talking about streamlining the curb ramp design process in CAD and explore the tools designers have available. A curb ramp is a short ramp cutting through a curb or built up to it. If designed and constructed to be accessible, a curb ramp provides an accessible route that people with disabilities can use to safely transition from a roadway to a sidewalk and vice versa. Many cities are undertaking street and sidewalk renovation projects to integrate accessible curb ramps for inclusive urban planning. However, retrofitting thousands of curb ramps into existing city infrastructure can be complicated and time-consuming. I'm going to provide an overview of ADA-compliant curb ramps that address current trends, common challenges, and show examples. Often they are retrofits that integrate into city infrastructure, and specialized tools have been developed that expedite the curb ramp design and drafting process while ensuring compliance with ADA standards. When it comes to curb ramps, as many of you know, they have been around in North America since the 1940s. Thanks to the lobbying of disabled veterans, especially Jack Fisher, a Navy veteran and lawyer, the nation's first curb ramps were installed in Kalamazoo, Michigan in 1945. So it wasn't too long ago, when, in terms of looking at it globally. And however, when ADA standards for accessible design were developed in 1991, a lot of the ramps built prior to that were found not to be compliant. In other words, they were essentially posing a risk to disability users. As a result, initiatives have now been taken to rebuild these ramps, and in addition, it has been key for any new projects to follow these standards as well. All in all, this has become a long-term process, and there still remains a lot of potential to optimize it. Over the years, curb ramps have evolved in many jurisdictions into a variety of different types with specific design conditions. For example, the Connecticut Department of Transportation now has 32 curb ramps listed in their design standards. And that was from the year 2022. And we're actually continuing to see DOTs update their standards. I'm going through the whole list of the 50, and I've already seen 4 that have up to 2024. And like I said, the Americans with Disability Act requirements continue to be updated more than 3 decades after the law was passed, and with mandates still in place to make public areas accessible to wheelchairs, walkers, motorized scooters, and so on. As previously mentioned, these standards were originally developed in 1991, and they're continuing. It's a living document that is continuing to be revised. And the Americans with Disability Act Accessibility Guideline, the ADAAG, was written by the US Board and adopted by Department of Justice in 2010. This document includes a broad range of accessibility guidelines, including businesses, restaurants, public facilities, public transportations, and sidewalks. And we're continuing to see this update, and in fact, like I said, even for the state of Utah, they also released their 2024 standards recently for road and bridge construction, and that includes those updated standards. Another example would be North Carolina. Now, looking at the importance of curb ramps, it is often difficult or impossible for a person using a wheelchair, scooter, walker, or other mobility device to cross the street if the sidewalk on either side of the street ends without a curb ramp. It is also dangerous. If curb ramps are not provided, these vulnerable road users are forced to make a difficult choice. They can either stay at home and not go to their chosen destination, or they can risk their personal safety by using their wheelchairs, scooters, walkers to travel alongside cars and other vehicles in the streets. This is a choice people with disabilities should not have to make. In fact, I was looking at a community consultation in my home country, Canada, in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. And as part of a rural accessible and age-friendly infrastructure assessment, some participants shared that they avoid leaving their homes unless absolutely necessary because they assume their chosen destination will be inaccessible to them. Since many people live in rural areas outside the town, it can be difficult to justify making the trip if there is uncertainty about how accessible the destination is. One participant stated, quote unquote, "I actively stay in my apartment and don't go out because I know I'm gonna get excluded and can't do anything. Everybody already assumes everything is not accessible." Therefore, curb ramps are small but important, but they are an important part of making sidewalks, street crossings, and other pedestrian routes that make up the public right-of-way to people with disabilities. They are vital in ensuring equal access for vulnerable road users. Many cities across the United States are undertaking street and sidewalk renovation projects to integrate accessible curb ramps for inclusive urban planning. Now, to really emphasize why the ADA compliance is so important, well, looking at a few figures in this country, it paints a clear picture. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, statistics show that 61 million adults in the United States live with a disability. The CDC defines a disability as any condition of the body or mind that makes it difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities and interact with the world around them. In other words, it affects their day-to-day life. Thus, 1 in 4 adults in this country, the United States, have some sort of disability. And if just looking at adults over the age of 65, that actually rises to 2 in 5. Now, having facilities that are not compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, impacts the lives of millions of people each day. These non-ADA compliant facilities are barriers for mobility and safe access for these vulnerable groups. And they may also decrease the safety for all users. As previously mentioned, many people with disabilities have shared that they avoid leaving their homes unless absolutely necessary because they assume their chosen destination will be inaccessible to them. This can lead to depression, loneliness, isolation, and social anxiety. Furthermore, a lack of exercise, actually. Now, looking at the curb ramps specifications in detail, the compliance of curb ramps is enforced by various parts of the ADA. And Title II of the ADA requires state and local governments to make pedestrian crossings accessible to people with disabilities by providing compliant curb ramps. To comply with ADA requirements, the curb ramps provided must meet specific standards for dimensions such as the width, slopes, cross slopes, placement, and other features. Departures from particular requirements of either standard by the use of other methods are permitted only when it is clearly evident that equivalent access is provided. For instance, there may be a situation where constructing a flare, like we can see in the bottom left here of this image, there's actually a fire hydrant on the right flare. And in those instances, it would be infeasible to construct that flare having a slope lower than 10%. And for example, this is included as a reason for exception across many jurisdictions. For example, the curb ramp hardship and exception for the city and county of San Francisco. In such situations, exceptions to accessibility design standards must be thoroughly documented. Taking a glance at the current construction progress, according to a study conducted in 2020, citing random samples of cities and counties, it was revealed that 65% of curb ramps are not accessible to people with disabilities. Of the 401 government entities reviewed as part of the study, only 13% had transition plans readily available. This is likely because only a few states have actually enforced the requirement or set consequences for not complying. And just a background, a transition plan provides for the removal of access barriers identified in a local public agency's self-evaluation and an inventory that includes budget and schedule for improvements. Furthermore, many places have taken a piecemeal approach to ADA compliance and upgrading their infrastructure to ADA standards only when maintenance or new construction is necessary. I can actually relate in my personal life. If, for example, I have a couch in my office and I need to vacuum under it, I'm probably not going to do that unless I need to perhaps repair the couch, and then I'll have an excuse to take the couch out and vacuum under it. Same thing with, that's known as a piecemeal approach. And another example would be looking at the state of New York. Based on the state's ADA transition plan, as of August 2014, there still remains 14,264 curb ramps and 395 miles of sidewalks that are deficient. New York Department of Transportation's regional offices independently estimated the cost of addressing all modifications and improvements on these curb ramps, as well as sidewalks, to assure ADA accessibility to be about $470 million. And that's based off of the report from 2014, and that's uninflated to today, so I'm sure it's a lot more. Now, the reason why I really want to emphasize just how colossal that cost is I think there can be enormous time savings, and specialized software and tools such as AccessRamp, which is what my company is developing, being used even on just a fraction of that quantity for these retrofit designs, is expected to save significant time and provide pinpoint accuracy. Now, as I alluded earlier, we have recognized the potential to optimize this process, and AccessRamp has been developed as a tool intending to help expedite by first giving an instant notification on each individual slope and cross slopes, whether they're compliant or not. Furthermore, elevations of critical points as well as distances are instantly provided, which can be edited to dynamically change the ramp. Examining the flowchart within this slide, it shows a manual process of designing and drafting curb ramps. And that includes the time in the field, such as collecting survey data. This is followed up with multiple design iterations to best suit the environment. It can result in tedious guess and check work because every time a component is adjusted, a chain reaction can occur that affects other parts of the ramp, such as slopes. I know this at firsthand because I previously had the experience of working in the United States, living there in California, and designing curb ramps. And it was a very long process for each individual ramp to meet the Caltrans specifications. Now, in this slide, I have the manual process of doing it on the left, and then to the right is using our software AccessRamp. And putting them next to each other, it is apparent that AccessRamp simplifies the process quite well. As mentioned from Pax's experience of calculating curb ramps, my workflow would have been significantly reduced if I had access to a tool like this. And furthermore, not just the time savings, but it would provide a pinpoint accuracy. There would be no risk in human error for doing these guess and check calculations for the required lengths and slopes. So next in the demo, I'll be showing how this curb ramp design tool can draft and design a curb ramp within a matter of minutes. This is a distinct contrast to the conventional guess and check method that I mentioned. And I'm aware that the majority of designers are still carrying this out. I've also seen, yes, they have developed spreadsheets which do help expedite it in a way in calculating the estimated values for, let's say, the top of the landing at the left side and so on. Still, it is going to require someone to check that spreadsheet against the drawing, jot it down with label and so on. Because I have actually used a spreadsheet like that, so I'm aware there are tools that help a little bit, but there is still nothing like what we have to offer. I'll be showing the next slide. Okay, so I actually have it as a pre-recorded video. I'll be playing it, and then from there I'll be narrating. Okay, so changing the gears a bit, different CAD platforms provide designers with different tools to model the entire roadway, including the sidewalk geometry. And that includes the flow line, curb and gutter, and surrounding grass, like we can see in this 3D image here. And this is what you'll typically find for the line work representing the design for the sidewalk area of an intersection. It is something that can be reproduced in any form of the CAD environment, such as Open Designer or Civil 3D. Often the starting point of this proposed line work is limited to a collection of survey points from the field, and getting this information interpolated to help form a flow line, curb and gutter, and the back of the sidewalk that is close to reality as possible. I currently have those highlighted in the cyan color, and you can see here I'm able to isolate it. And getting this information accurately becomes increasingly important in tight spaces such as busy intersections in downtown areas. In your drawing, you might have just one line representing, let's pause it. Yeah, so in your drawing, you might have just one line representing the back of the sidewalk. For example, the one at the front there. It really depends on, from the clients that I've seen, how the layout is done for the intersection design. And these aspects of the intersection infrastructure are ultimately the backbone information used to design the curb ramp. For example, like I mentioned before, when I was designing curb ramps in California, we actually used a flow line, which is in front of the back of the curb, and that was used to calculate corresponding points through rise of a run. When you have these elements, the specialized tool that I am using through this CAD platform, Open Designer actually, it will give instant feedback. We can see the program reacts to the conditions of these elements and generates a curb ramp slope with the lines changing accordingly. Here's a preview that's being shown. And I have the freedom to make fine-tuned adjustments to ensure comfort for people navigating the curb ramp using mobility devices such as manual wheelchairs, while also minimizing the footprint of accessibility for this infrastructure. And here I'm actually dragging to make sure that the angle lines up with the crosswalk there. Already right off the bat, the slopes are shown in the color green. That means they're compliant. If they exceed, for example, if the flares were to exceed 10%, we would show the label shows the color red. And here I'm just actually making the ramp a bit wider to align better with the crosswalk. There's a lot of freedom with this program. It's just a matter of clicking on the various grip points like I'm doing there. I'm dragging out the flare. It wasn't actually necessary to do that, but let's say if it was a steep intersection that required adequate drainage, it could be like that. And we can see the landing at the back can also be adjusted for its length. And yeah, it's quite, I do find it quite intuitive. Even in my first day joining the company, I was previously doing this by hand, and immediately I was able to get a nice grasp of how the software works. Here I'm actually exploring the design guidelines within the Utah Department of Transportation for curb ramps. And here are all the different types that are offered: perpendicular, parallel, combined, and blended transition. And in this tab here is showing default values. That's what's appearing when we're previewing the curb ramp. Like I said, the backbone of the software is from these DOT design guidelines. Here's the Utah 2024 design guideline that we are using for our next release. And zooming in here, we can see For example, the ramp has maximum slope labeled as 8.3%, landing is 2%, and so on. Yeah, there's an abundance of information. We're appreciative of the DOTs are making, and thank you. And yeah, it's great for providing a foundation in making this software useful. Just going here, I'm actually going to another area, a corridor actually done in 3D, where I have generated the surface. A request I often get from clients is that they want to see it in 3D to see how it looks visually with existing 3D terrain of this corridor template that I have. And here, hovering my mouse over it, it turns the color pink because it's in one block preference. And I clipped out the existing terrain. We can see it blends in nicely. The gutters right here, the curbs here, and there's a curb ramp. And I changed the color so it matches the existing sidewalk right there. Yeah, this can be highly beneficial. For example, in a meeting, trying to propose really there's a big difference between imagining in your head a parallel type curb ramp versus actually seeing it. That one's actually a perpendicular with two flares, and yeah, it's an awesome perspective to see it even from the underneath, like I'm showing there in the orbiting. So all in all, this tool has helped me get a curb ramp that I require with compliant slopes and cross slopes. And we can see, like I said, how it blends in with the existing conditions. As I was showing in the previous slide, it lines up with the design process. Within a matter of minutes, by the way, I was able to draft this curb ramp. And from there, I'm going to go to questions and answers. Yep.
When you're placing your ramp, if it is out of compliance,
Mm-hmm.
do you get a red line rather than blue or whatever else you were getting? And if you do so,
Mm-hmm.
then what do you do?
Yeah, so I'll give this hypothetical example. Let's say the ramp's too steep, 9%, and it has a minimum of, like we saw, 8.3%. Your question is, what happens if it's too steep, for example, not compliant? You're going to see in the label it shows as a color red, and the second part of your question is, how do we fix that? You can do a few things. You can make the ramp. You can drag out the ramp to make it longer, so it's a more gradual slope. You can make adjustments to the flow line where it's tied onto, or the back of the curb, like I did in that case.
And then during the construction, do you provide any guidance, anything along with the map to the workers who are building that, or no?
Yeah, so in terms of offering guidance, we can, like I was showing in 2D, there's a visual representation in plan view with labels. There can be a 3D isometric drawing, and for people in the field, we can also generate 3 types of reports. One that ties to the alignment, one that will show all critical key information, such as the ramp length, the slope of the ramp. It's a report, actually. I can show you later on in the booth what that's all about. Yeah, and there's, yep.
Will it report out the elevations of those key points?
Yes, your questions will report out, yes, the key elevations, yes it does.
X, Y?
Yes, there's actually a check, I can show you later on in the booth, yeah.
Does it clip the model and insert the line work?
That's correct. In order to get it to blend in, like we saw in the, yeah, it requires clipping of the existing terrain.
How long does it take you to put in the one? Like half an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours?
Using Access Ramp or doing it the old way?
I know the old way.
5 minutes. So your question is, in the big picture, is there a way we can see, for example, hundreds of curb ramps that are put down?
Yeah, so you have a corridor project with 15, 20, 200
Yeah.
curb ramps on it. Can you get a readout that says, we have 3% that are uncompliant, this is where they are, and this is the reason they're not compliant?
That's a question I've heard before, actually, at this conference, and at this time we do not. it is quite apparent though. It shows in the color red, the annotations. I'll take note of that. Thank you for that question. Yeah.
Let's say if certain jurisdiction, local jurisdiction, ask you, hey, in my city, I have so many, non-compliance RAM. So would you provide that service to go and study the whole city, either small, large, whatever city, and come back with the report, say, we have 30% non-compliance, 20% horrible, and only 10% okay. Do you provide that service also, or you just design and deliver?
Design and deliver.
You don't do the reporting to go and look at all the ramp within the jurisdiction and come back?
Negative. As to my understanding, speaking to people at this event so far, it is done internally within their respective DOT, and they go out with a survey crew and
There are some small cities that they don't have forces, or they don't have that expertise to go and analyze all their ramps and come back. I mean, small cities like, let's say in Duncan,
Mhm.
let's say in Wilcox.
Yeah.
They probably want somebody go and look at all the ramps within their jurisdiction and come back and say what percentage they have in compliance and what percentage non-compliance. There are cities that they don't have expertise. That's what I was asking. Would you provide that service?
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I'm aware they probably do not have the resources at this time either. They might not. Yeah, they might not have the resources at this time.
Say they would probably have to scan each area. And then maybe we need some kind of analysis software that, for future things for Transsoft, you could bring that point cloud in and try to analyze the point cloud, and then, see if it is compliant, and then see if you could retrofit something. My thought on that.
Yeah, that.
So I think in future extracted, if we extracted the flow line, the existing curb and the sidewalk, we typically as-built the joints too, because we want to make sure, we know how far to take the sidewalk out for the joints. So, but we could do that on existing survey data. It doesn't actually have to come out of the model.
Yeah.
Open roads, you could just have those feature lines to build your ramp on, right?
Yeah, I've got this request before, and our focus right now is the scope of this project is design and drafting. Surveying that is something to follow.
Oh, okay.
But in outline, I'm sorry, can I? There are some outline area, like I'm from Arizona. There are some outline area that there are small cities that they don't have any expertise at all, zero, but they are required still, to put the ADA ramp, and they are getting funded by their local municipality or by federal government that they have to put those ADA ramp, and they don't have any expertise at all. So I would recommend, if like your company, they can go say, okay, I'm here to analyze all your RAM, come back with your report, say this is what you have, and this is what I can do for you.
They're just a software developer. They're
Uh,
not.
I'm just trying to say, it is good to integrate this software development with that, expertise, come back and say, give me the whole thing, I will give you the report, and I will design it for you, and you go ahead and do it. That's what I was looking. I didn't mean to, I didn't mean to
Just
kill.
a software
I
developer.
have a.
That's your expertise.
To follow up on your question, actually, I was researching DOTs for guidelines, and I actually saw some states actually publish through a Google search. They publish they make an entire spreadsheet and listed with locations. For example, if you look up Maine DOT guidelines on Google, it'll tell you then all the curb ramps in their database, and it also tells you which ones are currently not compliant. That information is public right now.
Iowa DOT, we had a inventory done in the whole state of all of our curb ramps along our highways, 2007. It was a very stripped down, very simple, is this curb ramp quadrant compliant or not?
said, you gotta have RAM for disabled people. So that's what I was alluding to.
Or in Texas, they have a full database that's called TCAP, so it's not only the curb ramps, but it's also your sidewalk conditions as well, if those are ADA compliant. And so they've identified which ones are the highest priority, and sometimes if they don't think the data is most up to date based off of when that was last gathered, they'll send the design team out to go assess it and just get like a fresh batch of survey on in the field, and then they'll design off of that. So,
Yeah, this is, one shop,
Yeah.
one-stop shop.
yep.
Package.
Thank you.
In other words, if they had something, some report attached to this,
You
they
have
can
one more
provide
question?
the whole package to a city, done. You don't have to do any, as I said, I'm emphasizing small cities.
Do I have time for the jump?
One more question? Yes.
Like,
It's actually 3 questions. So does it check to make sure
I'm
that,
sorry,
I'll come over so I can hear better.
does it check to make sure that there's not a low spot or a water pond at the ramp
What is the low spot?
where water would pond when it rains, so it doesn't drain?
Like drainage
Yeah.
considerations.
So, gentleman that was asking me, does it provide critical points? So through that elevation information that's providing critical points, you'll be able to find the low point.
Okay, so you need to do that yourself. It's
Correct.
not gonna say, it's not gonna indicate ponding or anything for you.
I'll let you know though. That's a good idea to have a notification if it gets too close.
Right. So the other question, what type of those elements does it produce when you run, and are they linked to the design where it comes from?
So it's a smart block reference, and it can be done in either a phone designer or a Skull 3D.
Right, but is it linked to the design, so if the design changes,
Yes.
it's automatic?
If the profile changes, yes, that's when I implemented. Because when I was working as an engineer, I remember the pole line was constantly changing as part of the intersection design.
But it's only doing the top, right? It's not doing not doing the thickness?
It anchors onto the elevation points.
But are you doing the bottom of the ramp? The
This-
top and the bottom?
Subsurface.
Subsurface?
So the subsurface is something that's generated, I recommend at the end. In order to make the subsurface appear, it requires the terrain to be clipped out, and when that happens, it can't be undone. I recommend that as the very last step to the surface.
You can't delete that clip.
Well, the clip is going to be based off of at that exact time when you clipped out the.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so then you just apply surface template to it, is what you're
Yeah,
saying?
you just read. It's 2 minutes to do it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ben.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just want to check whether this thing was.
You can borrow my laptop too if.
No. I just wanted to check a simple thing.